Hello, and welcome to Bedtime Stories. My name is Frank Padour, and I'll be reading to you a Grimm Brothers fairy tale entitled The Three Languages. In Switzerland, some years ago, lived an old count. He had an only son whose intellect was so inferior that he seemed unable to learn anything. One day his father said to him, "My son, I have done everything I can for you, but your head can retain nothing, do what I will. I must send you away to an excellent master who shall try what he can do with you." So the youth departed to a distant city, where he remained with the master a whole year. At the end of that time he returned home, and his father said to him, "Well, my son, what have you learned?" "Father, I have learnt to understand what the dog says when he barks," answered he. "Heaven pity you," cried the father. "Is that all the knowledge you have gained? Then I must send you to another master." So the youth was again placed under the care of a first-rate master for a year. On his return, his father asked him the same question. "Father," said the boy, "I can now understand the language of birds." Then was his father in a rage and exclaimed, "Oh, you lost creature! Has all this precious time been wasted in learning nothing, and are you not ashamed to appear in my presence? However, I will try you once more with a third master, and if you make no progress than you have done during the last 2 years with him, I will give you up. You shall be no longer my son." So the youth went for a year to a third master, and on his return, when his father asked him what he had learned, he replied, "Dear father, I have this time learned to understand the croaking of the frogs." Then was the father in a greater rage than ever. He started up, called the household together, and said, "This youth is my son no longer. He shall not stay here. I order you to chase him from the house, and you are, any of you, at liberty to take his life." The servants drove him out, but they pitied him too much to kill him, so they let him go away unhurt. But they killed a stag, and sent the eyes and the tongue to the old count, to make him believe that his son had been killed, as he commanded. The youth wandered away far from home in a very sad mood, and came at last to a roadside inn, and asked the landlord if he could give him a night's lodging. "Willingly," replied the burgomaster, "if you do not mind taking up your abode for the night in the old tower. But I warn you that your life will be in danger, for the place is full of wild dogs who bark and howl and constantly seize and devour human beings. The whole neighborhood is kept in fear and terror about these dogs, and no one can do anything to get rid of them." But the young man had no fear, and he said, "Let me go to these barking and howling dogs. Only give me something to throw to them, and I'll warrant they won't injure me." As he would not sleep in the tower unless they agreed to his wishes, they gave him some meat for the wild animals, and then led him to the tower and left him. As he entered, not one of the dogs barked at him, but wagged their tails in the most friendly manner, ate what he had brought for them, and did not ruffle even a hair of his head. On the following morning the youth made his appearance, and stood before everyone safe and sound, and said to the burgomaster, "I understand the language of dogs, and they have explained to me clearly why they have caused so much trouble in the land. They are kept in the tower by enchantment, to watch and protect a great treasure which is hidden beneath it, and until that treasure is removed, there will be no rest for themselves or others, and the spell will remain unbroken. This I have discovered from their conversation." All who heard this news were overjoyed at the discovery, and the burgomaster said that if the young man should be successful in bringing away the treasure, he would adopt him as his son, for he had no children of his own. Then the youth went up again to the tower, and having understood well from the conversation of the dogs where to find the treasure, he knew what to do, and very soon returned to the burgomaster's house, carrying a chest full of gold. The spell was broken. The howling and barking of the wild dogs ceased from that hour, and the land was freed from the dreadful plague. A short time after this, the young man thought he should like to take a journey to Rome. On the way he came to a marsh, in which a number of frogs were croaking loudly. He stopped to listen, and as he understood their language, what he heard them say made him quite thoughtful and sad as he continued his journey. He had arrived at Rome just in time to hear of the Pope's death, and the great doubts which had arisen as to which of the cardinals should be chosen as his successor. At last, it was decided that whoever received a sign from heaven should be at once elected as Pope. Scarcely had this decision been arrived at when the young count entered the church, and no sooner did he appear than 2 snow-white doves flew towards him and placed themselves one on each shoulder, and there remained. The clergy who were present acknowledged at once that this was a sign from heaven, and asked the young count if he would accept the position of Pope. At first, he hesitated to reply, for he could scarcely believe he was suitable for such a high position. But the doves, whose language he understood, whispered that it was right to do as the people wished, so at last he said yes. Then he was anointed and consecrated, and so was fulfilled the prophecy which he had heard in the frogs croak, and which had made him so unhappy, namely, that before a month had passed he would be a priest. Of course, after this, he had to be present at High Mass and sing the parts, although he could not read a word of the Latin. However, the 2 doves who again perched themselves on his shoulders whispered the words into his ears, and so, after all, his acquaintance with the languages of dogs, frogs, and birds was of as much use to him as if he had been a man of great learning. That was a Grimm Brothers fairy tale entitled The 3 Languages. Thank you for listening. Good night and sweet dreams.